when it comes to climate change. And recently in COP29, the world committed again to 30 billion to be provided to help vulnerable countries. But will these commitments be honored? We'll wait to see. But we must demand a climate finance that is predictable, accessible, adequate, and fair. The era also of corporate and national impunity for pollution must come to an end. Our Secretary General, again, has called on polluters to do more in being part of the solution. In this region of South Asia and globally, I don't have to tell you, specifically in South Asia, I don't have to tell you the impact of air pollution. Air pollution is something that South Asia together can do something about. Air pollution kills globally about 7 million people annually, and disproportionately affects this specific region. And I'm so happy that this conference, conceived by the Dawn team, is an opportunity to really deal with something that collectively this region can deal with. When I was speaking to Harun during the initial discussion of this conference, one of the part that I really liked and wanted the UN to collaborate with Dawn was the issue of self-help, the concept of self-help. There's so much that the world and this region is not in control of, specifically when it comes to emissions, but I think we can all agree there are things that this region can do when it comes to air pollution. And I think this conference, an opportunity that it provides, is important. Pakistan has not been sitting and waiting. The minister has pointed out to some of the incredible plans that are ongoing, but I really want to mention this specific issue of the Living Indus initiative. And we have the Ministry of MOCC here. It was recognized by the UN World Restoration as a flagship program. It's one of the most ambitious climate adaptation and river restoration projects, and it aims to restore 30% of the Indus Basin by 2030. So I want to congratulate the government for the commitment on the Indus. I don't have to, again, re-emphasize how the Indus is an important lifeline for this country and how it has sustained this region for 5,000 years. Pakistan's leadership in restoring the Indus should be a source of national pride and a call for international support. The debate, I think we can all agree, is over, that Pakistan and the region must invest boldly on climate resilience and renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, mobilize private sector, and I'm really delighted to see that in this conference, with the support of Dawn, a lot of private sector leaders are here, and their commitment is very clear, and the role they have will be very important in this journey. I want to conclude by re-emphasizing a few things on terms of South Asia's leadership. I'm so happy to see a lot of presence from the entire region, and I'm also happy to see that the World Bank colleagues are here, and their commitment is steadfast. So are the other IFIs, IFAD. I also see that we have colleagues from the Asia Development Bank. We at the UN are committed to working with all of you to make sure that this region starts investing and making sure that it does its part in fighting global emission. The time is now for climate leadership, and I want to encourage all of you who are here today to participate in this conference to start finding tangible solutions to make sure this event is a start of something transformational for this region. Thank you very much, and Pakistan Zindabad.
Thank you for your insights, Mr. Yahya. We now request Global Director of Climate Change of the World Bank, Ms. Valerie Hickey, to share her thoughts.
मुल्क भर के 156 अजला में कौमी इंसदाद पोलियो मुहिम 3 फरवरी से शुरू हो चुकी है।
मुहिम में सिंध, पंजाब, खैबर पख्तूनख्वा और बलूचिस्तान समेत आज़ाद जम्मू और कश्मीर और गिलगित बल्तिस्तान के मुख्तलिफ इलाकों में 5 साल तक की उम्र के 4.5 करोड़ से ज्यादा बच्चों को पोलियो से बचाव के कतरे पिलाए जाएंगे।
पाकिस्तान में माहौलियाती नमूनों में पोलियो वायरस की मौजूदगी खतरे का बायस है, इसलिए वालिदैन अपने बच्चों को जिंदगी भर की माजूरी से बचाने के लिए पोलियो के कतरे जरूर पिलाएं,
क्योंकि फैसला आज करना है अगर कल बच्चे को चलना है।
A public service message by Dawn News.
बंटी, तुम्हारा साबुन स्लो है क्या?
नया लाइफबॉय सुपरफास्ट हैंड वॉश अब विटामिन के साथ। ये दे आम साबुन के मुकाबले जरासीम से 100% स्ट्रॉन्गर हिफाजत सिर्फ 10 सेकंड में।
सितारे हमेशा चमकते हैं बेटा, चाहे हम उनको देखें या ना देखें।
पावर प्लस शू शाइनर एंड पॉलिश अब नई शानदार चमक के साथ।
कुछ चीजों की चमक वक्त के साथ कम नहीं होती।
आज पाकिस्तान में हर 10 में से 9 बच्चों की खुराक में आयरन की कमी है, इसलिए जरूरी है नेस्ले बुनियाद आयरन प्लस, जो है 3 गुना ज्यादा मौसम। नेस्ले बुनियाद आयरन प्लस।
Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, we are on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. Absolutely true. We are on the road to reaching over 3 degrees Celsius change. This past year, we just passed 1.5 degree change, and look at what happened. Fires, droughts, floods. But even still, the planet's going to be fine. This isn't an environmental problem. So then this is the second myth that we have to bust. If it's not an environmental problem, what is it? We all know the answer. It's an economic problem. But this is the thing that we don't like to say enough. It's not a particularly big economic problem. We co-wrote with many government agencies and partners a country climate and development report 2 years ago. And looking at the models, it showed that Pakistan is at risk of losing anywhere from 6.5% to 9% of its GDP annually starting in 2050 because of climate change. That sounds like a lot. But the truth is, today, Pakistan loses over 6% of its GDP because of inefficient urban transportation. So that's a cost you're willing to put up with already. You lose more than that as a cost every year because of air pollution. And you're willing to put up with that. So at the aggregate level, the economic costs are not huge. So then the third myth that we have to bust is that it's everybody's problem. Because if it's not an environmental problem, if it's not an economic problem on the aggregate, what is it? It's a problem of the poor. And that's why we as the World Bank stand here today, because our job is to help you end poverty. And no country in the region has been better at ending poverty in the last 20 years than Pakistan. You've lifted 48 million people out of the indignity of poverty. But climate change is going to make that stop. As Pakistan has ambition to become an upper middle income country by 2047, it cannot happen with climate change, because you're still going to have 30% of the country, more so than today, who are going to be living in poverty, because climate change is a poverty trap. It's a poverty tar pit. It's impossible to get out of poverty when you scrape together, through your own blood, sweat, and tears, some small assets, only to see them washed away in a flood. Only to see you having to sell those few assets you have in a drought to put food on the table. I can't imagine anything much worse than for those 48 million people who in the last 20 years got out of poverty, who finally didn't have to worry about where their next meal was coming from, who finally had safe shelter, to fall back into poverty, to fall back into a place where they have to watch their children go hungry. And that's what climate change threatens. It threatens the people who've climbed out of poverty. It threatens to take away a path out of poverty for people who are still in poverty. This isn't an environmental problem. This isn't an aggregate economic problem. This is a problem for the poor. The next myth that we have to bust is that climate change is all about energy. And in many ways it is. If we're going to bend that curve of carbon emissions, we have to do it through the power sector, through energy. It's half of your emissions here in Pakistan, even though those emissions are less than 1% of global emissions. But the truth is, and what we don't like to talk about, is that that's going to happen anyway. The energy revolution has started. There's over $1 trillion, that's trillion with a T, being invested every year in renewable energy technologies. We don't need a COP agreement. We don't need a Paris agreement to manage this energy revolution. It has reached escape velocity. It's happening anyway. Look at solarization here in Pakistan. So energy isn't the sector that we need to keep focusing on with quite so much energy, if you'll forgive the pun. It's agriculture, and it's water. Because agriculture threatens to lose 17% of its market share globally, 17% of its food production domestically because of climate change. Think about what that means for food security. Think about what that means for foreign exchange earnings. In a country with the 5th largest beef herd in the world, that produces 6% of global milk production, climate change has added to the reality that half of Pakistani rangelands are degraded, directly threatening that beef herd and the foreign exchange that comes with it, and the food security that comes with it, and the cultural security that comes with it. This is about agriculture. This is about water. These are the sectors where we need to really put our energy. And finally, and this is the hardest myth to bust, but it is the most important one, climate finance. It is absolutely true that Pakistan is not the reason that fires are burning up Los Angeles. Pakistan is not the reason that 1/3 of the country 2 years ago was underwater and 3 million people fell back into poverty because of the floods. Pakistan is not the reason for drought and desertification in the Sahel. So it is absolutely right that the countries who have benefited from emitting should pay for the impact of those emissions on other countries. But good luck waiting. This is the problem. There are moral arguments and there are practical ways forward. And there will be too many people die if we wait for the global north to put on the table all of the money that morally they probably should. The conversations that happen under the Paris Agreement around the new collective quantified goal, we're great at coming up with acronyms on climate change, the NCQG, to move from $100 billion a year to $300 billion a year. That sounds like a lot of money. It's not. Most of it is in lending. It's not in grants. Most of it is already there. It's not additional. Part of this $300 billion a year commitment are the multilateral development banks committing to provide $120 billion of that. That means that the World Bank, for example, we're committed here in Pakistan in the next 10 years to using our finance to support you to create food security for an additional 30 million people, to make 75 million people resilient against the impacts of climate change. But that's money we were going to invest in Pakistan anyway. And we all know how difficult it is to access the very, very small grant financing that exists in the GEF or the Green Climate Fund or the new Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, which today has available $80 million. That's million with an M. So we cannot wait for Global North to send the money south. Nor can we expect carbon markets to fill the gap. Carbon markets are very much at an inflection point. There's good news. The Article 6 rule book was agreed to in the COP29 in Azerbaijan. So there will be a new UN-managed carbon market, but the voluntary carbon market is declining enormously by more than half in the last 2 years, from what was just $2 billion a year to now $700 million a year. That's, again, not a lot of money. So when it comes to international public finance, when it comes to the carbon markets, these revenue streams will ever only be the cherry on top. The money to bake the cake. The money to take advantage of the energy revolution, the money to help adapt, to help build resilience, to help use adaptation investments to modernize agriculture, to transform the water landscape, are going to have to come out of your pockets. It's going to have to come from government. It's going to have to come from subsidy reform, from new taxes, from changing expenditure, and it's going to have to come from domestic private sector, from local money markets, from local capital markets. That's where the money to bake the cake will come in international public finance carbon markets. That'll pay for the cherry on top, and cherries are great on cakes. That's all it's going to pay for. So we need to come together, and I echo what his Honourable Minister said in terms of thinking about climate change as an opportunity, not an obligation. And in terms of that, Madam Chairwoman, I wanted to propose that we change the name of this conference from Breathe Pakistan to Lead Pakistan. Because the world needs leadership, and you are stepping up, as I said, when everybody else is stepping back. And so I thank you and know that the World Bank stands with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your insights, Ms. Hickey. With this concludes our opening session. We would like to thank the Honourable Minister, Mr. Ehsan Iqbal, Mr. Mohammad Yahya, and Ms. Valerie Hickey for their thoughts and their time. We will now break for tea. We will take a short interval of 15 minutes, after which we will commence session 2, which is Climate Change and KP, which will be addressed by Mr. Ali Amin Gandapur, Chief Minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Kindly proceed to the foyer for a cup of tea. Thank you.
डॉन मीडिया की ब्रीथ कॉन्फ्रेंस का पहला सेशन आपने मुलाहिजा किया और अब शामिल करेंगे न्यूज़ हेडलाइंस।
हेडलाइंस के लिए ताउन किया है।
अब बाल दिखें घने फिर से डव हेयर फॉल रेस्क्यू।
इस्लामाबाद के जिना कन्वेंशन सेंटर में डॉन मीडिया के ज़ेरे एहतमाम 2 रोज़ा ब्रीथ पाकिस्तान कॉन्फ्रेंस जारी। डॉन ग्रुप के चीफ एग्जीक्यूटिव हमीद हारून और नाज आफरीन सहगल्ला खानी ने मेहमानों को खुशामदीद कहा। 15 सेशंस के दौरान 11 मुल्कों के 90 से ज़ायद मुकर्रिरीन माहौलियाती तब्दीली के असरात पर इजहार ख्याल करेंगे। मौसमियाती तब्दीली सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज है। पाकिस्तान का शुमार मौसमियाती तब्दीली से सबसे ज़्यादा मुतासर ममालिक में होता है। सैलाब के बायस पाकिस्तान को अरबों डॉलर का नुकसान हुआ। वफाकी वजीर एहसन इकबाल का ब्रीथ पाकिस्तान कॉन्फ्रेंस से खिताब। खैबर पख्तूनख्वा के जिला करक में पुलिस चौकी पर दहशतगर्दों का भारी हथियारों से हमला, 3 पुलिस एहलकार शहीद और 6 जख्मी। पुलिस की जवाबी फायरिंग से हमलावर फरार हो गए। रमजान शुगर मिल्स केस में शहबाज और हमजा की बरियत का फैसला आज सुनाया जाएगा। लाहौर की एंटी करप्शन अदालत के जज 12 बजे फैसला सुनाएंगे। चेयरमैन पीपल्स पार्टी बिलावल भुट्टो की अमरीकी सदर डोनाल्ड ट्रंप के दुआया नाश्ते की तकरीब में शिरकत। वाशिंगटन में होने वाली तकरीब में दुनिया भर से अहम शख्सियात को मदऊ किया गया था। सदर डोनाल्ड ट्रंप का गजा में अमरीकी फौज भेजने का इरादा नहीं। गजा की तामीर नौ के लिए पुरअज़्म है और फलस्तीनियों की आर्जी मुंतकली चाहते हैं। खित्ते में इस्तेहकाम के लिए अमरीका की शमूलियत जरूरी समझते हैं। तर्जुमान व्हाइट हाउस की वजाहत। गिलगित बल्तिस्तान हुकूमत का प्रिंस करीम आगा खान के इंतकाल पर 3 रोजा सोग का ऐलान। सूबे में परचम सरनिगू रहेगा। सरकारी तकरीबात सादगी से मनाने का हुक्म। गिलगित बल्तिस्तान में आज आम तातील है। कराची के इलाके मलीर हॉल्ट पर डंपर ने मोटरसाइकिल को रौंद डाला। बाप और बेटा जान बहक, बीवी जख्मी हो गई। गुजरांवाला से यूनान कश्ती हादसे में मुलविस इंसानी स्मगलर समेत 2 मुल्जिमान गिरफ्तार। मुल्जिमान ने मुतासरा शख्स से 45 लाख रुपए बटोरे थे। और चैंपियंस ट्रॉफी पेशावर पहुंच गई। इस्लामिया कॉलेज में नुमाइश के लिए रख दी गई।